Welcome to Clinician's Corner. Here, Molly and I will provide you with evidence-based insights and practical tools for addressing ultra-processed food addiction. This segment is designed for both individuals navigating recovery and professionals supporting clients through the treatment process. We will be bridging personal experience with clinical expertise to enhance understanding about the treatment of food addiction and the many pathways to recovery.
Each episode explores key topics such as the neurobiology of addiction, strategies for sustainable recovery, behavioral interventions, and the impact of diet trauma. We'll also discuss practical approaches for fostering self-compassion, managing setbacks, and building individualized, empowering eating practices.
Whether you are in recovery or a clinician working with clients, Clinician's Corner offers research-informed perspectives, real-world applications, and therapeutic tools to support long-term healing.
Join us the first Friday of each month for thoughtful conversations that equip you with the knowledge and strategies needed for meaningful progress in ultra-processed food addiction recovery.
Expert insights,
practical tools,
transforming recovery one conversation at a time. Hello, Molly. How are you?
Hello, Clarissa. I am good. How are you?
I am good. I just need to say right now, for people who can't see you, I love your hair and what's happening to it. It's so new and fun and not Molly.
They're my space buns. I'm channeling a little bit of Leia today.
I love it.
In honor of our topic today, I was having a hard time this morning with my hair. And I think as a girl, like you understand, like sometimes it's just not doing what you want it to do. And I got frustrated and I was like, space buns it is. And then I was regretting it. And then I was like, no, because I can break the rules.
Right. Because today what we're going to talk about is the rules we live by. And, we all live by rules, whether they're spoken or unspoken, obvious or hidden. And some are practical, right? Like look both ways before you cross the street. But
totally.
Others are like so sneaky. They come from society. They come from our families. They come from our culture, even older versions of ourselves. And so without even realizing it, sometimes we carry them around like they're the gospel truth, right? But the problem is not all rules serve us. And some of them actually create harm. Rules like, I always have to put others first. That was a big one in the Kennedy household. Or I can't say no to food at a family gathering is something a lot of our clients struggle. These rules may look helpful on the surface, but underneath, they can keep us stuck in shame, self-sacrifice, or behaviors that don't really align with our recovery. So today, I think we're not here to judge those rules or shame ourselves for having them. I think it's going to be important. We did this in Sweet Sobriety and people found it so helpful to get curious about our rules. So we'll kind of talk about where they come from and then how to examine our own rules as well. So I'm just wondering, do you have any maybe rules, maybe they're food rules, life rules that, have you maybe thought at one point they were helpful and you've learned maybe they're harmful?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I'm being kind of silly about the hair thing today, but it is one, right? Where it's almost like I feel really weird because there's this rule in my head that like, it's very immature to wear your hair this way, or it's not very professional, that, this hairstyle is like reserved for little girls, children or Halloween, so like, that's just like kind of one kind of surfacey example, but certainly there are deeper rules. I definitely have a deep seated, I guess like in the world of cognitive behavioral therapy, we would call them core beliefs, and I have some pretty deep seated core beliefs around, like you were saying, putting others first, or that like, I deserve to suffer. So, protect everybody else at all costs. Like those kinds of things definitely deeply get in there around food and that kind of thing. I don't know that I have rules around food so much as because of the nature of our work. So like in my own little home environment, I'm okay. But like when we're around other people that we work with, professionals or colleagues, like say when we were just in London around everybody for 2 days, I get really self-conscious about it. And I feel like I should have rules around those things that I'm eating. And I don't. Tend to pick and choose the foods that I know work for me. And I eat in a way that works for me. And that can then sometimes feel judged, or I'm worried I'm being judged. It's not always, is it being judged outwardly, but like in my mind, right? My anxiety shows up and says, oh, they're talking about me. They're thinking weird things about me. They're looking at my body or whatever, and they're making judgments about me. So, I mean, there are rules in there, but I think like you were saying, those are some of the more like covert ones.
Yeah. And because these rules are really almost like invisible operating systems, right? They run in the background, but they dictate how we act, maybe what choices we make. And like you said, how we see ourselves. And I think so from early ages, we are really absorbing these from our parents, right? I will thank my father for saying, I don't get to rest until all the work is done. That's a rule. And apparently I haven't rested in 45 years. But the work's never done. And what was also interesting when I was doing this presentation in Sweet Sobriety, I realized that another one of my rules was I'm not allowed to cry at a funeral unless I'm related to the person.
Oh, interesting.
Strange rule, right? And I remember sitting through funerals, like biting my lips so hard so that I wouldn't cry, even though it was like the saddest situation ever. But again, that would have been not an overt rule, but a very covert rule from my family of origin that we don't show emotion in public. And so maybe it's only socially acceptable for me to cry if I am related to this person, not if it's just actually a very sad situation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're so right. It comes from everywhere. Like when we have the finish your plate, there are starving kids in Africa. I mean, we're from that generation, right? We're from that time. And it's so funny because my husband tells this story that when he was a kid, his mom used to say that to him. And he says, you know what I said to her? I said, what does me getting fat have anything to do with feeding kids in in Africa? And, and like how astute for a little kid, first and foremost, right? He didn't want it. He didn't want to, whatever. And to put that together, like, how does me cleaning my plate, me treating my body like a garbage can, how does that help anybody else? Right? The don't upset your father, don't upset your mother, don't upset, right? Like those also get in there. I remember my stepfather was a Vietnam War vet, and he would fall asleep in the recliner chair. And you did everything you could to not wake that man up. And if you had to wake him up, you got a broom to poke him, right? Because it was just going to be like PTSD, like flailing arms, whatever it was. But it was like, you don't upset him. You don't wake him up. You don't get in his way. Like success means being thin. My mom all the time, you're a fat, lazy B word, work is your worth. Like you were saying, like, I can't rest until it's all done kind of thing, like the showing up, over and overperform and overproduce, self-denial is virtue, like you go without. My mom used to say that all the time. I sacrificed my body for you children. I went for years without a new pair of blue jeans for you children. And while that may have been true, it was weaponized in a way that then, right, becomes like encoded in us where it's like, oh, this is how I have to be.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're speaking about rules that are really holding us back and keeping us small, right?
Yeah.
So, when we want to start to explore this in our adulthood, if they still maybe exist, we're really looking at, are these rules that I still have in place maybe limiting my growth? Are they limiting my freedom or authenticity? Examples might be like, I must always say yes to avoid disappointing others. Well, now I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh yeah, this is what creates burnout. This is what creates resentment. This is what creates disconnection from my own true needs. Or, my worth depends on how much I weigh or how productive I am. Now it like is eroding my self-worth and it fuels my shame.
Yeah. Well, they're so rigid and like morally based, fear-based, right? Like, oh,
And I think it's so first we can talk about like where do some of these rules come from? So I think we've already touched on family and parenting because that's a big one. But I think another big one is society and culture, right? Oh, success today means I own a home, I have a car, I have a certain income, and I have a partner. And I also have two kids. And so this rule,
why did you just describe my life, Clarissa?
yeah. Well, you told me you're a rule follower. Like, let's say that.
I'm only a rule follower until the rules don't make sense, folks. Let's just make that clear.
But, for me, this rule pushes me towards these external measures of worth, right? Rather than saying, what does success actually mean to me? Oh, it means like I have meaning and purpose in my life. I am actually excited to show up to life today. I really, really I believe I lived by those rules earlier on in my life. And so I owned a restaurant, I married somebody, I built this life that actually did not serve me and wasn't my life. And because I was in that situation, I started drinking because I was unhappy, because I was trying to live the life I believe society wanted me to live and my parents wanted me.
Right. And I think that's so, it's such a clear illustration of like when we live outside of like our compass, our internal values, our internal ancient wisdom, whatever, there's this like weird kind of like resonance inside of us. It's like when things get out of tune, and like you feel that like weird vibration. It's like living with that, you have to do something to cope. It's like, it's so big and it's almost painful sometimes, right? It's so extreme that you need extreme measures in order to be able to cope. So it makes sense that so many of us think that we have to live with that inside these rules. And we're so young when they get encoded, we forget or we don't even realize they're given to us because that's what worked for them. And that's what helped them manage and control us little people. But as we got older, we are our own people and we don't fit in that box.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's so true. I think another place rules can come from is like religion or tradition, right? Good people don't question authority. Good people don't, insert whatever. And these rules are so covert because they offer belonging, right? So what is one of our greatest human needs is to belong. And so if I am not doing these the problematic way, the way they create harm is guilt and shame, which are two very difficult emotions, right? If they clash with my authentic self, it's like we're carrying around, I like to think of these rules as us carrying around this like old instruction manual.
Yeah, it's like outdated.
Somebody's life, right? And it's like, but it can't be updated.
Well, that's the belief. It can't be updated, but we're here to talk about that it can, right? At some point, we're going to get to that. Yeah.
And I think it's another one is like peers and media, right? You look like the images. We are all to that now. And this just amplifies that comparison. It's like we're living in this like hall of mirrors all and walking around seeing, but everything is distorted, right? And so we're just trying to figure out like, who am I supposed to be? And so I think that can be really challenging for people. And I think like we also are going to have our own personal experience. So we do something and then it doesn't go right or well. And the rule then becomes, I must never let that happen again. For me, it was like playing the piano on stage and I froze and I forgot. And I was like, nope, done. Never do any public speaking or anything on stage again. And that just comes from protection, right?
Totally.
Survival strategy. But it's like, now I've built this fortress after a storm, but I never take the walls down, even when it's nice out, right? It keeps us stuck.
Yeah, right. We get into that black and white thinking like it's either going to be like all protective or it's going to be all awful or it's going to be all amazing and I'm going to be perfect or it's going to be I'm a big failure. And I think like we can get into that, like the slips that right we with our clients, the slip and we failed. Like it's like slip equals failure. And I'm saying that like that is the thought process, right?
Yeah.
Or like if I'm not perfect.
Who made that
Yeah.
rule? The food addiction program I'm following make that rule? Did I make that rule? Where did that rule come from?
Yeah. And I think it comes from a lot of different places. I think the programs that people get into, because think about how old we are by the time we actually get into treatment of any kind or intervention, right? We're much older. And those programs just reinforce things that were already there. They were already there in religion and traditions. They were already there in our homes. They were already there in the society at large. They were already there because of diet culture and whatever else, right? Like purity culture is everywhere. The black and white, good and evil, innocent or guilty. Like it's just everywhere.
Yeah. Or written in the 12 steps how many years ago and not been updated since.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. But I also think that, there are in the beginning, they made sense and they probably did keep us safe. But like you said, then they became outdated. It's like that, like you said, like that book or that old manual that you're just like, this doesn't even make sense anymore. It's a totally different operating system at this point. Like I'm 1,000 different people than I was when I was 20 and I'm only 42, right? Like I'm just so many different versions of myself at this point.
No, I was listening to this one podcast that was kind of talking about something similar like this. And it was like a daughter who was asking her mom, like, why do you always cut the ends off your roast? And she's like, I don't know, because grandma did it. And then like mom asked grandma and grandma was like, well, my grandma did it. And then when you look at it, like the original grandma, why she actually did it, she only had a pan this big.
Oh, so
Like we've been
funny.
following this rule for so many years and it doesn't make sense in today's world, but this is
what is so
right.
You're telling this story and it reminds me of, so a little bit of like, I guess, Molly lore. I met my father-in-law when I was 14 because he was my softball coach. Like that's how long my in-laws have been in my family. He was my softball coach. And when he was a kid, he actually got part of his finger cut off in they were messing around in a construction site or something, right? He got part of his finger cut off. So anyways, he's our softball coach and he's teaching this other gal on my team how to throw a ball. So pretty soon she shows up and she's throwing the ball really weirdly. And we're like, Annie, what are you doing? Why are you throwing the ball like that? And she's like, well, that's how Bob showed me how to throw the ball. I'm like, Annie, he doesn't have it's not his finger folded over. He doesn't have a finger there. Like that part of his finger's missing, but it's like how that stuff gets encoded, right? It's just like you just believe that that's instead of when we don't ask questions, when we don't push back on authority. What's so funny about that too? A little more Molly lore, and then we'll get back to we're on a rabbit trail. My mom was huge on pushing back. She used to say, I don't care if that person is a teacher or a cop or somebody in an office building. I don't care who they are. Just because they're in a position of authority does not make them smarter than you, does not necessarily make them right, all of these things. And so I learned to question and push back. You just couldn't do it to her because then there were violent consequences. There were violent consequences, but you could do that with anybody but with her. But, it's so interesting how when, like you said, it's like nobody really knows why we're doing that thing until we ask enough questions. It's like, oh yeah, if the pan's only that big, of course you're going to cut the ends off and do whatever. You only you think the finger's folded over when really it's not. So like, this being willing, or willing's the wrong word, but like giving yourself permission to be curious and just ask questions like, why am I doing this thing? What does it get me? Does it actually get me the thing that I think that it's getting me or that I want it to get me? I don't know.
No, it's so true. And I think we can start to even talk about like, how do we start to examine these rules, right? Because rules only have power when we don't notice them. And so once we pause to look closer, we can begin to decide whether they still fit in our life and maybe the life of recovery I'm living now, or, are they casting a shadow on me and making me small? So all we're trying to do today is like shine a light on some of these rules. And maybe we can go through like some examples with maybe is relatable in food addiction recovery.
Of course. Yeah.
And so this is a common one with clients that I have. And the rule is I can't ever eat anything after dinner. The kitchen is closed. And so again, I think number one, where we go is whose voice is this? And so I would say the identified voice that most people came up with was Food Addiction Society. And this is just like collective messages they hear in recovery groups. Maybe it's books, podcasts, social media. And what's now happened is this has become my rule.
Yeah. Right. It's that, I don't remember the exact word for it, but it's like when our identities kind of get wrapped up in this, like we take it on and we like wear it like a piece of ourselves because we don't really know our own voices. So we're just kind of like collecting these pieces like a patchwork quilt of like, yep, I'm just going to take it on and own it. Even if it doesn't necessarily feel like a right fit for me, that's what my belief is, quote, that's what everybody else is doing.
And that they must be right.
And they must be right because I've only ever been wrong. And I've been told I can't trust my own thinking because my own thinking is what got me here.
Right. And so again, like if we start to look at like, what is that underlying belief that you're talking about is that real recovery means strict, rigid boundaries. And if I don't follow this rule, I'm failing.
Or I won't ever get what they have.
Yeah. And so even just naming, okay, whose voice is this? That voice isn't necessarily you. It could be an external standard that you've absorbed. And so naming it can actually start to loosen its grip on you. And then we have to ask ourselves, what is the intention behind the rule? So getting really clear on what is the intention behind the rule. And this sounds to me like a very protective intention, right? It can create a clear boundary and prevents, grazing or binge episodes and like maybe some structure. It sounds like actually maybe it could be a really helpful, rule to start out with in early recovery.
Sure. Yeah. And I guess I think of them less as rules. And I like to think of them as like loving guardrails when I'm thinking about it for myself, because rules are about controlling people's behavior and boundaries are for ourselves. So I wonder if that too starts to help. And maybe I'm getting too far ahead of
I love it.
The conversation. But this idea of, like you said, like maybe it is kind of a nice, gentle way to just say, you know what, in the beginning, because I have to go through this painful experience of withdrawal, and I'm losing that buffer. So now there's going to be this deficit between me and my skill set that I have for coping with the world because I've relied so heavily on the food, the alcohol, the cigarettes, the gambling, the sex, whatever.
Screens.
The screens. Oh my God, the working and the exercising. And so it's going to be a bit painful. It might get worse before it gets better because I'm going through the pain of withdrawal and I'm now really aware of that deficit between where I've got the skill set and tools and like reality. And while I'm bridging that gap, something like a boundary around like, you know what, I'm going to have some like structured time around my meals can actually feel like a safety net.
I was just going to say safety, right? So the intention behind the rule is some safety. And so it's like there might actually be in early recovery, this could be really beneficial, not punishment, which is maybe if I'm later in recovery and now I have that safety and structure and I've been doing well and like I have a really busy day and maybe I ran a race early today and like my body actually needs energy and I finished dinner and I'm noticing I'm still hungry. If this rule is in place that actually served me in my early recovery and now I still try to live by it, it can feel like punishment.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where, I think people who work primarily in the eating disorder world get frustrated with the food addiction world because this is where the restriction really shows up, right? Is this like belief that there's these rules around, like you said, like the kitchen is closed. And while this may have been a loving limit or guardrail that served us early days, or maybe even the day prior, today is a different day. I just ran a race. I actually am physically more hungry. So today, this isn't a case of like rules are meant to be broken, but when we think about it more as like a loving limit or a guardrail, that gives us room to have flexibility in our thinking and go, oh, maybe today is a day where I do need to like honor my body's messaging to me and go ahead and eat. And I think that's where, sometimes colleagues in the food addiction world only can really kind of lose the plot. Like we have to have flexibility in our thinking. Otherwise, it does feel rigid. And now we're back into stress and anxiety. And am I going to return to the alcohol and the food and the work and
No, exactly. And it's like, this distinction matters because this helps us decide what to keep or change. And so that's what comes to the next one is, does this rule serve me today? Right. And so, yeah, helpful in early recovery when evening eating is for most of us like a really like common time, right? And potentially can lead to a binge. If we've been dysregulated all day, we use food to regulate. That makes sense. Also, if nighttime snacking, which comes from like boredom or emotional eating, right? But if we say, does this rule serve me today? It can be potentially harmful if I am physically hungry because of activity, maybe medication. Maybe I had a really light dinner and now I'm feeling ashamed to honor my body's physiology anymore. And so just even noticing that, and it can reinforce that all or nothing thinking like you just talked about, which is actually a mental trap, right? Cognitive rigidity that if you ever eat after dinner, you've blown it. And that spirals into guilt and that spirals into return to use.
Yeah. That's where I like to flip the script a little bit. So I think when we are so focused on rules, whether we're aware of it or not, we really get into this place of like, I can't break it. I can't break it. I can't break it. I can't break it. And so we get into this like white knuckling, like grip it. And with everything I have, I always say like, I'm hard to get rid of. It's like dig our claws in and like, no, but what if we flip the script on that and we said like, what would happen if I didn't abide this rule tonight?
You just hit number 4. Number 4 is what happens if I break the rule.
Yeah, right. Like, what do I imagine might happen if I tonight gave myself permission to have more food?
Right. And probably the fear is I'll lose control and binge. And the fear is, so we're talking about this is what's happening, right? It's this imagined fear. I'm not really in recovery. If I eat after dinner, others will judge me. Right. Like we're talking about at the conference, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Imagined fear.
Yeah. And so, okay. So there's the imagined fear part. What else? What else could happen if I let myself have more food? Oh, I might actually be able to go to bed not hungry.
Right.
I might be able to sleep better. I might not be so angry.
Right. And because I've given myself permission, I don't have to have this shame spiral story around it, which can, trigger further overeating.
Yeah. Right. What would that be like for you? And so I would say like when the fear shows up, then that's when we can really get into like, okay, what would need to be in place? What components, this is the solution focused me coming out, right? Like what components would need to be in place for me to not give in to the fear or have those fear things come true? Like if I really want, well, now I've, actually nourished my body and listened to my cues. I can actually sleep tonight. I'm not so grumpy or angry and irritable. I'm not like having the mental gymnastics of like beating myself for even thinking about eating outside of the rules and the window and whatever it might be. Like what kind of components would have to go into place to like make it possible for you to be more flexible in your thinking? Do you need to tell somebody, this is where I'm at, this is what I want to do, and I just want to like let somebody know because I don't want it to get out of control? Do I need to pre-portion that out? Really think about it. Do I need to do some mindfulness practices before I sit down to eat this meal? What would let me know that it's not actually what I need is more food and maybe I need something else? I just start to get really curious around this kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. And when we get curious, it takes us out of the threat system, right? Our amygdala, and it brings us into our prefrontal cortex, which is that wise mind, executive functions and regulatory state, right? And so this is where now we have the chance to do a possible rule rewrite, right? So my old rule maybe was I can't ever eat anything after dinner. Kitchen is closed. Maybe my new rule is I stop eating after dinner unless my body signals true hunger, which in case I now allow myself a planned recovery friendly snack without shame.
Yeah. Oh, rule rewrites. Okay. So how do we do that though? Like without chaos? And maybe we can't. Maybe like we need to like make sure that we set people up for success.
It might be messy.
It might be messy and it might feel really
scary,
bad and scary inside. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad for us.
Right? Just because it's different doesn't mean it's dangerous. We say that all of the time in sweet sobriety, but our nervous system and our brain might be telling us a different story when we try something new.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's so interesting about this too is, and I'm sure you hear this in groups as well, because we have the same client base, right? Is that so often when we're in group, people talk about their rebellious side or their rebellious part. And I think the rebel in us often shows up with the rules, right? We're like, don't tell me what to do. I'll do what I want. Oh, you think you know better? I'll show you, right? Like, I think that part can show up. And the beautiful part about this rewriting rules is we actually have the ability or the opportunity to use flexibility and work with the rebel instead of saying, yeah, the rule was this and now the rule is going to be that. What if we replace some of those things like I can't with like, I choose not to, or that doesn't work for me today.
I love that.
Right. Or like, instead of like, oh, I never do that, or I can never do that again. Again, it's like, what about just not right now? Like, what would that be like for your nervous system to just play around with? Yeah, just for right now, the closing the kitchen tonight just doesn't work for me. What does that feel like? Does the rebel show up? Is there a different part that shows up? Is there a voice that says, "Ooh, this feels really bad. Okay, what would let me know this is actually bad for me?" Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, just like when we anchor those rules in like values, like, oh, I really value honoring my, my internal wisdom. I really value, I guess like staying true to my truth versus that fear part of like, who's going to judge me? They're going to tell me I'm doing it wrong. Now I failed, start over. Tomorrow's day one, all over again, like the spiral.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing so much of is like a lot of these rules probably began as survival strategies, whether they are our survival strategies or somebody else's that we adopted, and they can make us feel safe and they can make us feel more in control in those vulnerable times. But over time, they become this automatic script, and then they can keep us stuck in the shame, like you were just talking about, or even, sabotage our recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. You're never around to get to hear it, but my husband often refers to you and I as disruptors. Okay. So he's like, you guys are disruptors, and not in a bad way. Like he's on our team. Right. And this is where I like to be disruptive, because the thing is that you're right. Rules kept us safe, especially early in our lives, even early in our recovery. And that structure often provides safety. Okay. And I think about, here's where I'm going. I might be keep me on track if I'm a little rabbit hole.
Excited for this because my mind is exploding over here.
Right.
People can't see. Brains are exploding all over the screen.
So as a mental health professional and a substance use disorder professional for the last 20 plus years, I have seen how, sometimes we have to be, I hate to use the word rigid, but structured, very structured in the beginning. We have to have clear plans, this is what I'm going to do. And if not this, then this, whatever it might be. And as we grow and heal, we can actually like release that a bit. We can get more flexible, and the healing is what happens in order for us to get there. And what's frustrating for me is that I often, and that's true with any other, you break an arm and you're in a cast, it's very structured and rigid, and you're like maybe in a sling and you're told not to do certain things with it. And then the cast comes off and maybe a brace goes on, and now maybe you're in physical therapy, but you're still restricted on what you can do with it. Right. But over time, it becomes more flexible until finally you're using it again. Right. And the same is true for recovery, whether it be substance use disorder, mental health, whatever it might be. And so often I hear clients repeating messaging that, they're only going to get sicker and sicker no matter what they do. And so everything they do has to become more and more rigid. And we watch that happen with our clients. We watch our clients take more food out of their food plans. We watch them get stricter and stricter on the amounts and how often they're eating. Like, we just watch their worlds get smaller and smaller and smaller. And it breaks my heart, because we need to flip that. We need to flip that. In no other area of medicine do we do that
Yes,
ever?
exactly. The goal is to have a bigger life.
Yeah.
It's less about the substance, not more about the substance.
Yeah.
Even with like alcohol use, I'm not now like monitoring every single other thing I'm drinking during the day, right? It's like, whoa, I went really crazy on the water today.
Right.
Like that is not the idea. But what I'm hearing so much of is like, these rules were born in vulnerability. These rules were formed at moments we were powerless when we were children. And in recovery, early recovery, we feel powerless. And that's where in that moment, the brain said, this is dangerous. I never want to feel this pain again. Right.
And I don't want you to feel this pain again if I can help it.
But what's happening now is these rules are keeping us stuck and they are creating the pain.
Yes. Yes, they are. They so are. They so are. And when we can finally, get really clear with ourselves is like, what is it? And I remember this when I finally let go of my therapy practice, my therapist said to me, she's like, Molly, tell me what is it? What is it that is keeping you holding on? Really? Like, what is it? What do you have to gain by staying anchored in that world? And I was like, oh, nothing. It's old messaging. It's that story of like, this is how I'm successful. I'm not successful if I don't have, 40 clients a week. I'm not successful if I don't make X amount of, I'm not successful if I don't have a brick and mortar office for people to come to. And so as soon, like, it was like freedom. I was like, oh, and it was a rule that was keeping me stuck. And look at how big my world has gotten since I let that go.
You're international.
I'm international, baby. Yeah. Right? It's crazy. It's crazy to me to think back to myself 5-6 years ago, have like crying, snot and tears, ugly crying, session after session after session of being miserable in the life that I had and not wanting to give it up because I was afraid.
Yeah. And that's where I think compassion is really going to come in so much with this, because all of these made sense at some point.
They did.
So now that's where the compassion is, right? When we identify the origin story, right? The where, the when, the why it began, we can see they're always protective, not defective. And this allows us to see it with kindness, rather than shame. Even if it was a rule like don't cry at a funeral, it was probably protecting my parents at some point from maybe something that happened in their own life. They never told me that. It wasn't an overt rule. It was a covert rule that I picked up. And so if I look at it from that compassion, I'm like, does this rule still protect me, or is it keeping me from healing?
Yeah. I like to just again, flipping that, and just seeing like which rules actually help me live in recovery. Like, what are my recovery values and which rules actually help me stay there and even grow beyond, and we can't predict the future, but if there are rules that are showing up and they're not actually helping, yes, and they're not actually helping me live like the recovery life. I mean, this is where I've gone no contact with my mom amongst other people. Like, I used to really hate that about me, that I would be like, oh, snip, snip. It was a dark joke. But now I can see that, I had to prune relationships in order to get the relationships that I have now, in order to feel my best, to feel my safest. I mean, you and I were literally just talking before we hopped, hit record of just how much we feel safe and held and seen by the other person. And I couldn't have that if I kept those other relationships, because those other relationships would have kept me spinning. They would have kept me feeling not enough. And I think we can see that with the food rules, with the diet culture rules, with, anything that keeps us small and stuck.
No. And again, it's like one way to be able to say is thank you, old rule, for, protecting me and keeping me safe. But I am ready to come into myself now and try something different. And I believe that I've got the skills now to be able to do that. And if I'm nervous, I'm going to do it with support.
Yeah, I was going to say, even if I give it a try and I realize, oh, maybe I still need to practice with that tool a little bit.
That rule was in place for a reason. Amazing. now I know I don't have to like decide, right, to change it or rewrite it. That's a good rule, but at least it makes me feel like I'm following something that's legit.
Exactly. Yeah. So we can do thought experiments, we can give it a try. And at the end of the day, you're right. Like that support piece where even if I don't fully have it, somebody around me does. I mean, how often do I like come to you and I'm like, oh, and it just takes like 5 minutes with you and you can like really help me reframe that. And the same goes for my therapist and my husband and my sister. Really, when we have people, when we have these communities of people that we can go to that just help us to see, I used to say to group, and sometimes they still hear me say it, like, let us be your prosthetic prefrontal cortex. Like, if you're wondering, run it by us. Like, let us reality check it for you a little bit. Like, we see you so differently than you see yourself. And we have the privilege of the 100-foot view. Sometimes those rules we can see are not helping you. I'm never going to show up and say like, hey, Clarissa, you better check that rule because I can see how it's really messing your life up. I'm never going to say it that way. But if you come to me, I might start asking, and you are really good. You're like, ask me the hard questions, Molly. You're like a glutton for punishment. Our clients don't love it so much. They're like, Molly, I hate when you ask me those questions. But, just to get those questions going, to just start to expand our minds. And then when we come to it ourselves, guess what? Now we own it. Now it's no longer a rule given to us to control our behavior. Now it really is our value, or it's more of a internalized, I don't know. It's just that ownership empowerment piece. It's empowering.
That's exactly it. I mean, I have seen some of the biggest shifts with challenging these rules among clients. I had one client who was with that nothing after dinner rule. And anytime they allowed themselves, it was always a binge because they were breaking the rule. And so now I was like, let's just try an experiment where this week you're allowed to have something after dinner, obviously like on her food plan. And she's like, I love it. And I haven't binged. And it's like, because you gave me permission. And I was like, no, my friend.
Right.
You gave yourself permission. And so when you realize that your old rule wasn't serving you anymore, she now has a completely different relationship with herself and the food at that time of day. And it was like magic.
I love it. I love it so much. Right. Oh my gosh. So to just like, when people find their own voice and they live their own truth, I'm going to get emotional. Like that is the thing. That's what I live for. I live for that. I live for watching those transformations because they're not mine. They're theirs, because I know how it feels for me when I have my own, right? And how just like painful sometimes the process can be getting there. And like, sometimes I'm telling you, I am kicking, screaming, like I said, ugly, crying, snot and tears, but
at least we're doing it together.
It's true though. It's true. But it's like when the shift happens, it's like settled in my, it's settled in my soul. It's settled in my chest. Like it is in my center. Like it's like that sigh of just like regulation.
You see that in your clients, right? When they're like,
right.
They're like, okay, that landed for you.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
And I hope this episode landed for all of you who are listening. And if you have questions or even show ideas, you can reach us at
foodjunkiespodcast@gmail.com.
Amazing. We will see you next month and let us know what you think.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for joining us this week on Food Junkies Recovery from Food Addiction. Make sure to join our Facebook group, Sugar Free for Life Support Group. I'm Sweet Enough. Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals who offer one-to-one counseling and group coaching through Sweet Sobriety. Please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in today's episode, we'd appreciate you leaving us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps grow our show and allows us to reach others who need to hear this message of recovery. Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies. And as Vera always says, the power is ours.